For the third alteration, we're going to use a fitted sleeve. This fitted sleeve has a fairly high sleeve cap. It's also got elbow darts. Not all sleeves look like this, but we're going to use this particular sleeve so you can see any of the details that might show up in a sleeve. I will always have my grain line. And remember, all of my alterations are based around the grain line. For this set of alterations, I am going to lengthen above the elbow. So this line that I just drew is where I want to lengthen, and it's perpendicular to my grain line. It's also parallel to this other line, which happens to be just the underarm, like where the underarm begins. The other place that I'm going to make an alteration is below the elbow. And you'll notice that all of these curves are starting to go a different direction than the grain line. That's okay. I am still going to base everything on the grain line. So this is where I will shorten it. So lengthen here, and I'm going to shorten here. First, I'll just cut along that first line that I drew. And tape it to another piece of paper. Let's say I want to increase the length of this sleeve in the bicep area by 1/4 of an inch. I'm also going to draw on my grain line. I'll get rid of this extra paper. And I can line up the bottom part of my sleeve with the top part of my sleeve by matching up that grain line. Once I've done that, I'll fill in all of my missing information. And by all the missing information, I mean all of my seam lines, as well as all my cut lines. This method is called the slash and spread method. We'll get into some other methods using a seam allowance method in later alterations. So I've just lengthened the sleeve, and that alteration is finished. Next alteration, we'll just show what it looks like shorten. Now, I don't have to add any other paper, at least right now, but let's shorten this by 1/4 of an inch. So I'm just going to draw another line, 1/4 of an inch down. And line my pattern piece up. And I've, in essence, gotten rid of 1/4 of an inch right there. So when I tape this together, my sleeve will now be 1/4 inch shorter. Notice the way that things are really off over here. The more angled something is compared to this grain line, the more you're going to have that problem. At which point you might need a separate piece of paper to help blend everything together. So I'm going to grab this other piece of paper to help blend this section. I'm just going to go from the bottom here up to the bottom of the dart. So notice how much shifted. I'm also going to do that same thing with my seam allowance. So here's my new seam allowance. So even if you're shortening something, it doesn't mean that you won't have to add paper. You might just have to add paper so that you can fill in all of the missing details when things got shorter. And that is alteration number 3, how to lengthen and shorten different areas of the sleeve.